What a year. Tonight begins the new year. We look forward with hope and optimism, but it's fitting to pause and look back as this past year has come to a close. And what a year it has been. Let's take a moment to remember what things were like a year ago. We were concerned about anti-Semitism in America, but it was different. We were aware of problems on college campuses, but we didn't know how deep the problem was. We were more focused on Elon Musk, opening the floodgates of Twitter to vitriol against Jews, and then his crusade against ADL, blaming the Jewish organization for the devaluation of his company. In Israel, among the Jews, there was division, polarization, and mass protests over the judicial crisis. But to the outside Arab world, peace was in the air. Everyone was optimistic about the Abraham Accords and new relations with UAE and Bahrain and Morocco. Rumors swirled that Saudi Arabia was next. We were optimistic about our future in the region. And then came October 7th. The news came to us slowly, as even in Israel, they were not sure what was happening. Hour by hour, it was a horror. We saw bodies lying dead at a bus stop. We saw videos of terrorists spraying machine gun fire at passing cars. We saw hostages, young and old, loaded onto trucks, taken into Gaza. We were stunned. We did not believe this could happen. And then came the dread. We knew that day that Israel would have to invade Gaza. We knew that day that many more would be killed, Israelis and Palestinians, in the war that Hamas had just begun. The days that followed brought heartbreak and horror as we learned about the lives of those who were killed and the savagery that they faced at the end. Judith and Gadi Haggai were a sweet, retired couple that chose to spend their twilight years on a kibbutz. They went out for a walk that morning and were murdered by gunmen. Aviv and Livnat Kutz and their 3 children were found dead, holding on to one another in their safe room. Gili Adar was 24 years old and the most joyful young woman anyone knew. She loved dancing and was excited for the music festival with her friends. She hid for 4 hours before she was found by Hamas and shot point blank. On that day, over 1,400 people were killed and 229 were taken hostage. It was one of the darkest days in the history of our people. In Israel, the response was shock, horror, and anger, and then grief, overwhelming grief. Israel's such a small country that most people had a connection to people who died. Individual Israelis attended multiple funerals for their friend's granddaughter, their neighbor's aunt, their co-worker's husband. The country that had been torn asunder politically, united in an instant. Everyone supported one another. The military called up 350,000 reservists. Israelis traveling abroad or living in America scrambled to find planes and report to duty. Thousands more came who were not even called up. They didn't wait for the call. They just showed up at their bases and reported to their units. Hotels housed 120,000 refugees, first from the south and then from the northern border along Lebanon. Restaurants mobilized with volunteers to make food for the troops and the displaced people. Thousands of city dwellers rode buses each day to the farms along the Gaza border to help in the fields that needed workers. The entire nation mobilized, young and old, to tend to the wounded, comfort the mourners, and keep businesses open that lost workers to reserve duty. By the time Rabbi Elaine and I arrived in Israel to volunteer, there was an unmistakable euphoria. We had heard about it before we arrived, but it was something else to witness. The Israelis told us one after another, "I did not think this was possible. I never thought that we could be this united again. I never thought I would see this again in my lifetime." But in the quiet moments, the sadness returned. Hundreds of soldiers have died serving in Gaza and the northern front. And the hostages, the torment they are enduring. No Israeli can go to bed at night without thinking about what it must be like for them. Today, Israel remains in pain. Some hostages have returned home. Some were murdered while captive. Others remain, their families in anguish. Residents of the north continue to live in hotels or with relatives in the middle of the country as the deadly rockets from Hezbollah have rained down for over 11 months. The new school year has started in Israel. They want to go back home. Israel has reached its limit with a year of terrorist rockets unprovoked. They have escalated their response in Lebanon. We pray that soon the northern border can be quiet again, and there will be an end to these acts of terror coming from all directions. That is what it has been like for Israel this past year. What a year it has been for us too, here in America. On this first day, let us look back on what we experienced. On October 7th and the days that followed, we felt the pain and the grief along with the Israelis. We are tied to that country with 1,000 heartstrings. We have visited the land. We have relatives there. Israel is a source of personal pride. And in a troubling world, Israel is a promise of protection for us and our descendants. We care. These are our people. We were also scared for ourselves. We might have forgotten But days after the attack, Hamas called for a day of rage against Jews everywhere. People in America were frightened. That day, half of our preschool families did not bring their kids to our school. They were scared. And members of our office staff who are not Jewish, their families were worried. They got calls from their siblings and their kids. Mom, I don't want you working there anymore. Why don't you find a job someplace else? We Jews have grown used to this. For our non-Jewish staff, this was new. That week, the temple leadership decided to have a security guard on campus every day. Before then, we only hired a guard for services and other major events. Since October 7th, we do it every day of the work week and every session of our schools and when our members gather in the evenings. It has cost us an additional $200,000 each year. I don't see us ever going back. Last October, we had dozens of members tell us they will not attend any temple gathering without a guard. And then came the ugliness from the college campuses. It started at Harvard. On the day after the attack, 36 student groups signed a statement holding Israel responsible for all the violence. The university's president and administration did not condemn this indifference to the murder and rape of Jews. Instead, they gave support to these students. On other campuses, significant numbers of students and faculty celebrated the attacks and openly called for an increase of intifada violence. At Columbia University, the protesters became more aggressive and set up encampments in the student quad, creating an ongoing environment hostile to Israel and Jewish students who support Israel. The encampment spread to dozens of campuses around the nation, though primarily at elite schools in the Northeast and California. Jewish students on these campuses reported ongoing harassment and hostility. Professors spoke out openly against Israel in their classrooms. Demonstrators disrupted graduation events, or the fear of them caused administrators to move the events online. American Jews and Americans generally watched in disbelief. How could their values be so twisted? How could they support the side that has rejected every peace deal? How can they support the side that is led by a designated terrorist organization? Why do they rail against Israel that is trying to avoid civilian casualties and support the side that specifically targets civilians? It was utterly baffling. When we were in Israel, we made a point of telling everyone there how much American Jews supported them and stood by them. They appreciated that a lot. But over and over they said, "We're more worried about you. We know who our enemies are. They're over there. You have to live among anti-Semites. Here in Israel," they said, "we have each other." It's been a bad year for American Jews. But friends, I am pleased to acknowledge that it seems that the pendulum is swinging back. Elite universities are undergoing a reckoning. Some of the most egregious presidents have been fired, and their colleagues have taken notice. The administrators that were caught off guard last year were prepared this year and are acting more forcefully. But more importantly, most of the students have moved on. Where protests used to attract hundreds, this fall they are attracting dozens or fewer. I read one story in the national press about a college protest that had 6 students. It's not good right now, but it's better. I hope we're finding a ceiling of how much civil society will tolerate rhetoric against Israel and Jews. Some of the most strident anti-Israel politicians have lost their primaries. Both Democrats and Republicans made special efforts at their conventions to show their support for Israel and the hostages. I am grateful for that. We should not take it for granted. Our fellow Jews in France don't have that. So looking back at this year for American Jews, it's been a bad year, but it's ending upward. We pray that next year will be better. That's what it's been like for American Jews this past year. Let's take a moment to look back at this year for the temple. It started on such a high. We celebrated the extraordinary act of generosity from our anonymous donor, whom we call Papa Joe. Papa Joe gifted every young family $2,000 every year toward their dues. It led to a surge of 31 new member families with children enrolled in our religious school. It was a blessing to our people and our future vitality. This past year, our temple continued to shine in good deeds throughout the community and serve our members in their times of need and in their times of joy. And we continue to grow. A week ago, our temple hit a new milestone: over 800 member households. This year, we launch a new Growing Together campaign to enhance our campus and its security. But as we look back at this past year, it will be known as the year of Amichai. This was the year that our temple mobilized in support of Israel and one another in a time of tragedy and challenge. It started the day after the attack. Rabbi Elaine Glickman visioned 14 different projects that would be run by temple members. Hundreds of members registered for the projects. Each one had between 50 and 150 participants. One team organized weekly letters to the editor in support of Israel. One team organized advocacy among U.S. officials and government agencies. One team researched charities in Israel and encouraged all of us to give each week. One team provided support to our teens who were facing anti-Semitism on social media. Every team made a difference, strengthened by our numbers. I've never been more proud of our temple. I feel bad for people who are not part of this. I do. I sincerely feel sorry for anyone who is not a member of our temple family. After October 7, we needed each other. People needed to be at temple. We needed to be with other Jews. Our services saw large attendance. For the first time, attendance at lunch with the rabbi passed 100 people, and it never came back down. We love our non-Jewish friends. But this year, we were feeling things they could not share. Our grief, our vulnerability, our determination. I think that's why we felt we had to be here. We just needed each other. A few months ago, I got a call from an old friend. He was worried about me. He said, "This must be a tough time to be a rabbi." His question caught me off guard. I guess it's been a special challenge for some of my colleagues around the country. I know many rabbis are walking on eggshells as their congregation is divided among or about how much to support or criticize Israel. That has not been my experience here. The opposite. I am one of the Jews of Sarasota who has found solace in Temple Emanu-El. I'm so grateful to have this community of support. And as a rabbi, I have never felt a stronger sense of purpose.